All right, here we go. Finding inverses of functions. First thing you really need to know is you can't just start finding the inverse. You actually need to check to see if this function is one-to-one, which would be another lesson. You can kind of look up that on your own. This video will just show you about how to find the inverse, assuming that it is one-to-one. And there's really one fact you really need to know. This is what you really need to know. F of f inverse of x, so the composition of these two, f of f inverse of x equals x. And that's like the main idea. What is the inverse? It kind of undoes what the original function does. So if I plug in an x here and the inverse does something to it, the original function undoes that. Or you could think about that inversely. F of x, if you plug that inside f inverse of x, it would undo what happens to x. So it really just spits back out the original. So you can see when you can compose the two, they undo each other. And we're going to use this fact right here. So if you were writing notes, this is what you need to remember. You got to start it off like that. That's the conceptual thing that you really need to understand. Because you might see, or you may have learned, oh, how do I find the inverse? Just switch the x and the y. Well, that's that's it. It might not really help you with different types of problems. So if you understand this piece, what it actually does, it'll help you a little bit more. So let's just dive in. Let's just try this problem. So f of x equals 4x plus 2. This is an easy example. If I start off with this fact, I write that fact down first. F of f inverse of x equals x. All right. Now, what I do is I use this original function. So f is the outside. So I start writing f of x, 4x plus 2, and then I replace x because I'm composing those functions together with f inverse of x, right? So this was inside. You can kind of see this used to be f of x right there. Now it's going to go right there. So this is f inverse of x, and that's all one thing, f inverse of x. You can think of that as like the y as well. I'll show you that example over here. So now we just have 4 times f inverse of x plus 2 equals x. Well, my whole goal is to figure out what f inverse of x is, which is the inverse, all right? So what I do, I subtract 2 from both sides, okay? These two cancel, and I'm left with 4 times f inverse of x equals x minus 2. Nothing fancy so far. How do I get rid of the 4? Divide by 4, divide by 4, and I am left with f inverse of x equals x minus 2 over 4. That is the inverse right there. That's it. That's your answer. Boom. You could check that. You can compose those together. You could plug this in here and you would get x. And some books, that's what it'll have you do. If you learned it the old way, maybe it's not the old way. I guess it depends on where you're from. If you had an equation that looked like this, y equals 4x plus 2, I've seen this, and I think this is actually probably how I was taught, is just switch the x's and y's. What that looks like is this. And you can see it's really the same thing. I would subtract 2 from both sides. X minus 2 equals 4y. Divide by 4, divide by 4. X minus 2 divided by 4 equals y. And I guess I got a little bit of a hang up with that because we started off by saying y equals 4x plus 2. So y can't equal 4x plus 2 and x minus 2 over 4. It's not a system of equations, is it? Well, I guess it could be, but really this is supposed to be f inverse. F inverse of x equals x minus 2 over 4. So maybe if you do it this way just to solve it, and then you get this, you just have to end with this statement, f inverse of x equals this. That would be how you do an easy example. The next, I will try a more difficult example. All right, so here's our more difficult example. It's more difficult because it's a fraction. Students tend to be adverse to fractions. So we're finding the inverse. We're still going to use that main fact, the big deal. So this is, if you're going to solve these problems, this is what you start off with. F of f inverse of x equals x. All right. Hidden hint here, or hidden skill, I guess I should say, is using a whole piece of paper if you need it, writing neatly, taking your time. I don't have the neatest handwriting, but I make sure I write neatly. Okay, so how do I figure this out? So f is the outside, so I'm going to write this whole function here, write this part without the x's, and inside the x's I'm going to put f inverse of x. So that's going to be 3, and then f inverse of x plus 4. Okay, that's the top, 3x plus 4, 3f inverse plus 4 over 2 x minus 3, but the x is f inverse of x. All right? So what does that equal? And this is the other part, I almost just forgot it now. What does it equal? It equals x, so make sure you bring that x down, all right? That's key, because if you don't have that here, I've seen students write all kinds of stuff over here they just forget. Remember this fact, write that fact first, and then that's what you can double check along the way. All right, so now I need to end with f inverse of x equals something, right? That's what I'm trying to get. So I need to get this alone, but there's two of them. One's in the denominator. Well, let's just get rid of that denominator. So how do I get rid of the denominator? I should multiply both sides of the equation by 2 f inverse of x minus 3. Okay, I'm going to multiply both sides of the equal sign, right? So there, those cancel. All right, so I'm multiplying this whole thing times that, and I'm left with the top. So we got, let's see, 3 times f inverse of x plus 4 equals x times 2 f inverse of x minus 3. All right, so I'm just doing this in step by step here. What I need to do next is I need to get this x needs to be distributed through. There's two terms here. It needs to be multiplied times this first term, which is 2 f inverse of x, and the second term, which is negative 3. Okay, so this is going to become 2x f inverse of x. So that's three things that are multiplied together. 2 times x times f inverse of x. That's all together. X times negative 3. Negative 3x. A lot of people forget this part too. All right, so then over here I just have the same thing. 3 f inverse of x plus 4. All right, I'm that much closer. So first skill was multiply times the denominator, then distribute. Now I need to get all the inverses together grouped on the same side of the equal sign. So I'm going to move these 2x f inverse of x over here, and at the same time I'm going to move the 4 over this way because I want to get all the f inverses of x's over here and everything else on the other side. All right, so basically just algebra stuff. 2x, subtract 2x f inverse of x from both sides, minus 2x f inverse of x. Okay, at the same time I'm going to subtract this 4. So that's going to go away too. I'm going to subtract 4 over here. All right, so when I simplify that, let's see, simplify that, that's going to be, I can't combine like terms because this is 3f inverse of x, this is 2x, so those aren't like terms yet. So that's 3f inverse of x minus 2x f inverse of x. The 4 is gone, equals, okay, so this was all gone, so I'm left with negative 3x minus 4, okay? All right, so then now my last skill is something that I learned in algebra. I need to do something called factoring out. So I see there are 3 f inverses of x's here, and there's 2x inverses f inverses of x here. So since both of these have an f inverse of x factor, I'm going to pull that factor out. So I'm going to factor out an f inverse of x. So this is going to be f inverse of x times what's left over here, 3, because f inverse of x times 3, f inverse of x times 3 minus 2x. So if I distribute this through, I get back to my original. I just factored it out, right? There's that, minus negative 3x minus 4, okay? And I am right there. Hopefully you're like, oh, I see it. There's one f inverse of x right here, right? So I'm going to divide by 3 minus 2x, divide by 3 minus 2x, and I'm left with f inverse of x equals negative 3x minus 4 over 3 minus 2x. Now, this right here is my answer. I looked in the back of the book, and I also used Wolfram Alpha to check my answer. And it had something that didn't look exactly like that, but it was logically equivalent. It distributed a negative 1 to the top and the bottom, and it made it like 3x plus 4 over, I think it was 2x minus 3, which is the logically equivalent. This is my inverse. So going through those steps really quickly again, once I have this and I plug it in, usually when it's a fraction, I need to multiply the times the denominator, distribute, move all the f inverses of x to one side, factor out, and then I get my answer. That is how you do the more difficult example. Good luck.